Rabbi Sai, like I just said that this is B'li'ayin hara Yenakein Yitan Hashem V'chein Yosef. This is my 37th year, the 35th year, the 35th Shiur, 35th year. And Rabbi Goldstein, I'm very, very sorry what happened the other night. Rabbi Goldstein showed up and it was, all right. The pasuk says that Vayichtav Mordechai es hadvarim ha'ele vayishlach sefarim el kol hayudim asher b'chol medinas hamelech Achashverosh hakroivim v'arachokim. Remember, it was 127 medinas, so there were kroivim and there were achokim. L'kayim aleim liyasosim es yom chamish ha'abos l'chodesh adar ve'eis yom chamisho also b'chol shona v'shona. Right? This was a kayomim asher nochu b'hem hayudim oivehem, that the Yidden in the Prozim celebrated Purim on the 14th. In the Mukafas Chorma, they celebrated on the 15th. V'achodesh asher nepach lohem yogen me'ever leyomtav lasos oisam yemei mishta v'simcha mishloach monas v'shlereyu matonas levyonim. Okay, but this is what that it was matonas levyonim. It was okay before a few psukim before the pasuk said that al kein hayudim aprozim hayoshim borei aprozos oisem eis yom abos lechodesh adar simcha mishta v'yomtav, that the first year only the prozim made the yomtav, the mukafim didn't, and they made it simcha mishta v'yomtav v'mishloach monas ishlereyahu. Okay, it doesn't mention matanas levyonim, but it mentions yomtav. So in the original, the first year after the Nes of Purim, they made the days actually days of yomtav. But in the final Kabbalah, when they were Makabbalah and Mordechai HaTzadik and Esther HaMalka agreed, they were Makayim and Makabbal only Simcha Umishta Matanas Lavyonim Mishloach Monas L'Shareyu, but they weren't Makabbal Yomtiv. You see that the word Yomtiv is missing from the second pasuk. So based on that, so the Gemara says in the Daf Hey, the bottom, Daf Hey Omid Beis, the Gemara says that the Rebbe nota netia b'Purim and rochatz b'korona shel tzipora b'shiva osa b'tamuz. The Rebbe planted something on Purim, some kind of a netia, and he bathed publicly on Shiva osa b'tamuz. Okay, so we're not, obviously our discussion is in Shiva osa b'tamuz, but Tosfos talks about that why that. Since the Tanesim in that time were totally in Rotzu or not Rotzu, he could have even eaten. So Tosfos has an explanation. So the Gemara asks here by Purim that how could Rebbe plant, because Netia is an Av Melocha, Zoreya and Noteya, right? One is maybe an Av, maybe one is a Tolda perhaps, but they are two really of the same, Zoreya and Noteya. How could Rebbe plant on Purim if Purim was a Yom Tov? So the Gemara goes through a whole series, a whole shakla v'taya, how could it be and what happened, and trying what we would call it a rationalization. You know, like a good lawyer would try somehow to find some tzad that he didn't, and in the end, the Gemara says that, and then the Gemara brings a ma'aseh, it says that Rav saw someone that was planting flax on Purim and he cursed him and the flax didn't grow. And then in the end, the Gemara says that, the Gemara comes with the final answer that Rabba Bered the Rav Omar, that it was that Rebbe was actually in Tveria and he probably kept Tesvov, okay? And it was the day of Purim according to Rebbe, and even so, he said that Hesped v'Tanis Kebilu Alayu, that they were Makabal, Hesped and Tanis, but Melocha lo Kebilu Alayu. But they weren't Makabal, the Isa Melocha v'Yomtev, which is the psukim that we just learned, the Mikorach Siv Simcha Mishta v'Yomtev, because the first psukim when it speaks about the prozim, it says that the prozim were makabel simcha mishta v'yom tov. V'lasov ksiv, and then when it came the prozim and the mukafim, it says lasos asam yemei mishta v'simcha v'lo yom tov lo ksiv, because evidently that they weren't. It was gezeda shein rav atziv yechol alamad bo. That's what it must have been. It was gezeda shein rav atziv yechol alamad bo, and so memela they weren't makabel yom tov. Okay, which is what is a Toisus and Ezo Neshech. The Taz brings it in two places in Hilchas Cholamoid and in Hilchas Tisha B'Av, that's why the Chazal allowed a lot of leniency during the 9 days and during the Chodesh Adar, because he said it's Gzeira Shein Rov Atziba Yechol Lamed Bo, because the cash flow was very limited. You had a business and the cash flow was very, very limited, and you put a sign out, I'm closed for a couple of days, and your customer goes to someone else and he doesn't come back. He's satisfied. So Memela, the Chazal were the Alpitoisus in what because Toisus and Ezer Neshech talks about why the Chazal was so makel in ribis for an akum, all right? And he says because life is very, very difficult, expenses are very, very great, and the panosa comes very, very with great difficulty. So Memela, the Taz says that the same applies to Cholamoid and to the 9 days. That's why the Chachamim were very lenient. Okay. So over here the same thing, that Mustama they weren't Makabel Yonta because of the Gezeira Shein Rov Atziba Yechol Lamed. Okay. So that's what the Chazal say. All right. Here there's a Meshach Chochma, and the Meshach Chochma brings this Gemara, and the Meshach Chochma speaks about the Issa Malach on Purim at that time, when they thought, according to the first Kabbalah, that the Prozim kept the Yontiv, and the Minig of Malacha later, because even though there's not an Issa Malacha, but there's a Minig Malacha. And the Ramah says that in all of our Ashkenaz Medinas, the minig is not to do Melach on Purim, and that's what's it's an interesting thing, because in the shuls where they have several minyanim, I had what I remember in my shul in Sydney. So there were 2 or 3 minyanim Purim morning, and they wanted to know, get a certain minyanim. Which is the main shul minyan? Is it the 5:30 minyan? Is it the 6 o'clock minyan, or is it the 8 o'clock minyan? And I said it's the 8 o'clock minyan, because since the Ramah says that we're noig not to do melach on Purim, so it means the 8 o'clock minyan is the Ikar, and the shul minhagim have to follow whatever is practiced at the 8 o'clock minyan. Okay, that's just okay. There's Yerushalmi, and in the second parak, on a Mishnah, the Mishnah says, it talks about the inyan of Kavona by Kriyas HaMegillah, HaKoras HaMegillah Mafreya, Kora Oimed V'Yoshev, the different dinim of Kriyas HaMegillah, and the Mishnah says that Hoya Kosvov Dorsho Magia, that a person was writing the Megillah. He was writing it. Evidently, he was copying from a Megillah, and while he was writing the Megillah or correcting another Megillah, he was reading from the whole Megillah, from the Kosher Megillah. And is he yoitze with the mitzvah of Kriyas Megillah in that way? Because he's writing another Megillah, he's correcting a Megillah. So the Mishnah says yes. It depends. Im kiven libo, if he had kavona yotza, right? Okay, then it's yotza. Okay. So here, the Yerushalmi says that you see that there's that Purim is mutter b'melocha, right? Even though Rabbi Bereda Rava said that they weren't makab, but it's not certain that all of the Amoraim held that. It could be that if you look in the Gemara and you look very carefully into Rabbeinu Hananel and to some of the Perish of the Rishonim, it may be that not all of the Amoraim were makabel that idea that they weren't makabel malacha. Al Kolponim, the Yerushalmi says that if there's a Beferish Mishnah, and the Mishnah says that he was reading the Megillah from a kosher Megillah, a complete Megillah, and at the same time he was writing and copying it for another Megillah, and im kiven liba yotza, so obviously you see that Purim is mutter b'asiyas malacha, because ein lecha malacha gedolah medos. I mean, mechol hamoed is a whole the Mishnayos and the whole Siman in Shulchan Aruch about ksiva chol hamoed, right? Okay, so if the Mishnah says that he was reading the Megillah and he was also writing a second Megillah, so it means that malacha and chol hamoed is mutter. So the Yerushalmi says that, no, it could be something like this, that Purim was Shabbos, and they were makdim the kriya to Erev Shabbos. And Erev Shabbos is Chol Gomer, like it was in Yerushalayim last year. They read the Megillah, because you don't read the Megillah on Shabbos because of the Gezerah D'Rabbah. And it could be that it's talking about that Purim was Shabbos, and they were makdim to Erev Shabbos, and in that specific case, right, in that specific instance, so im kiver liba yotza, right? That's what he says. Okay, but Purim gufa, when Purim is bisman b'yudal or b'tesvav, no. Okay. The Osameach, the Meshech Chochma, goes on, and he poses what he considers a very, very, very fundamental question, and he said, why didn't the Bavli mention this point? The Yerushalmi says that you see from here that Melacha is mutar on Purim because of the Mishnah, and the Yerushalmi is doichet that not necessarily. The Bavli doesn't even raise the point. The Osameach says, isn't it a very, very simple, obvious point? Okay, right. Zokt, and I wrote here, Vayotza Kebarak Chitzon. And he came with a very, very a gewaldige chiddush, and not to minimize the chiddush of the Osameach, of the Meshech Chochma, but I saw afterwards it wasn't so much kabara chitza. Why? Because the Yeshuas Yaakov, the Lemberger Rov, said the exact thing probably 100 years before, and he held like that. Okay. And the Osameach and Lemberger Rov, they say al pi Rov's memran dav zayin that sudas Purim shachla belayla liyotzi yedei chavasa, because yemei mishte v'simcha, because since Purim is yemei mishte v'simcha, and from that Rava learns that sudas Purim shachla belayla is liyotzi yedei chavasa. He learns from there that even if there's an Issa Melacha, the Issa Melacha is only in the daytime and not in the nighttime. Okay? That's what the Osameach says, and the Lemberger Rav says the same. In the end, right, and the Osameach and the Lemberger Rav both remain with that, and they held that Ledin, even if Purim is really also about B'asiyas Melacha, or even according to the way that we're noyeg not to, but it's only in the daytime and not in the nighttime. No, it's not for us to say it's very schwer, but it's very schwer. There's Tosus in the beginning of Psochim, when Tosus in that base, when the Sugya talks about when does the Isser Tanis begin on a Tanis Sibba? Okay, at night or in the morning, right? Okay. So Tosus says in Beis Shammai, so Tosus says that although the svara is that there isn't a day, there's no such a thing as a day which is miktsasa mut and miktsasa asa, right? Tosus says not always, because Tosus says that if there's a specific reason that miktsasa should be mut and miktsasa asa, no, I'm a meila. But Tosus says that what the Gemara meant, that there can be a Yom Shemiktsasa Mutter Miktsasa Osa, means when there's no real reason. Like Ach Bayom Arishan Tashbisu Sam Betechem. So there's a reason why the Torah gave a very, very specific and a very, very valid reason why part of the day is mutter, part of the day. But to say that the Chachamim should come and say that and the same is in Mokum Shenoagu with Machlokas Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. When does the Isser Meloch and Erev Pesach start? And Beis Shammai says from the night, and Beis Hillel says only in the morning. And the same Shakla V'Taya, you have in Tosfos Yom Tov talks about it in very, very great length. And so, and on that, Rabbi Yehuda said, how can it be a Yom Shemiktzosa Mutter Miktzosa where there's no reason for it? There's no specific reason. There's no acholak or anything. Okay. And Tosfos gives an example that Ave Psochim Lo Yochel Odem in Amin Chalamayla. There's a good reason. There's a very, very good reason why that you should eat matzah l'te'oven, you should eat the korban pesach l'te'oven, right? There's a reason, but without a reason, why would we say miktzos is mutter, miktzos is also? Okay. The Yerushalmi, again in the Yerushalmi is, remember that there's a lot of Yerushalmi on, the Yerushalmi is extremely important on Purim, because remember that the reason that they differentiated between the Prozim and the Mukofim was Lachla covered L'Eretz Yisrael. So because of that, the Yerushalmi is very, very significant, very, very important on Purim. Okay. Yerushalmi asks that the Mishnah, the Sugya begins that the Kfarim are Makdim and Liyom HaKnisa. That the Chachamim allowed the Kfarim, the small villages, the Derflach, to be makdim the Kriyas HaMegillah to the Yom HaKnisa. What is the Yom HaKnisa? The market day, either a Wednesday, either a Thursday or a Monday. All right, as long as it's not before Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, Yud Daled, and Tezvov. Okay, for what reason? For what reason? Because they provide on Purim, their services are needed to provide the ayoras and the krochim with the tzarchet Purim. Like it is, they come and you see in Eretz Yisrael, you certainly see, if you go in the morning, you see the tenders coming in from the kibbutzim, to the shuk and Machne Yehuda and all over, because that's the way that it always was, that the cities existed by the produce of the fields, of the kfarim, right? Okay, fine. Frag the Yerushalmi that in that which the kfarim have to do to supply the needs of Purim for the ayoras, there's Chilul Shabbos, Chilul Yom Tov involved. But how could the Chachamim allow the kfarim to be makdim liyom haknisa so that they should be available on Purim to do what has to be done? Purim is also Asiyas Melacha. The Yerushalmi is still going. The Yerushalmi, interesting that din that the Bavli says that lo kibila alaya, that doesn't say it in the Yerushalmi. What the Yerushalmi holds is in itself a suffix. But check the Yerushalmi, how could they be makdim to allow the Bnei Hakfarim to supply the cities on Purim Day? It means malacha. They go out into the fields very, very early in the morning. They harvest the fruits, they harvest the potatoes, whatever has to be done, and they bring it they get in the tender and they drive to the, it's a chilul yom tov. Okay? Zok the Yerushalmi that mideh the hava cholamoid. He says that cholamoid, even if cholamoid, the issue of cholamoid is minat Torah, but still, that which is Sorach HaMoed is Mutter. Okay? No, who holds, we discussed this one time, who are the most prominent of the Rishonim that hold that the Yisuf Chol HaMoed, Yisias Meloch is the Rais, it's Rashi and the Rashbam, the grandson. The Rashbam was the grandson of Rashi. And they hold that the Melechas Chol HaMoed are also Minat Torah, nevertheless, that which is Sorach HaMoed you're allowed to do. Right? Even Min HaTorah, even Giluach, if it's needed, you're allowed to do it. The Chachamim Asad Kidei Shelo Yikonis LeMoed Kishum Menuvel. But Eile Megalchem BeMoed, where there's a Tzorach HaMoed, right? And that mission is according to Rashi, the Rashbam also, even if the Isam Melocha Cholamoid is deraisa, but Eila Megalchem B'moed, because it's a Tzorach HaMoed, right? So Mamela, the Yerushalmi says that the Yemei Purim, if you say that the Yemei Purim are also b'melocha, Simcha Mishta v'Yom Tov, but nevertheless those melochas which are tzorach hayom, which you need for the Simchas Hayom, are mutter, right? And the emes is, the Mishnah is beferish, that the Mishnah says that kosev odem tefillin la'atzmo, kosev odem tefillin la'atzmo, right? And the kosev odem tefillin la'atzmo, Rashi says, because because he needs, Rashi says that he has to put on the tefillin on Yom Tov, right? He has to put on the tefillin on Yom Tov. And there's Tosus in we had in Menachos, those that are learning the Daf Yom in Chagiga, in Erevin, that Tosus talks about what if Cholamoid is also about tefillin. Are you allowed to write tefillin then? And does it depend if the Sofer has Englo Male'echol, he doesn't have Hatzua Simchas Yom Tov. But Al Koponim, the Mishnah says the Kosev Odem Tefillin La'atzmo B'moed, right? And certainly if Cholamoid is Chayav B'tefillin, certainly, there's no question, right? No, this is a Melocha Deraisa. And what I showed you last week, and that Rashi and Sukkah and Daf Mem Aleph says that hoyo lefon of mitzvahs habe, a person has several mitzvahs that he has to do at one moment, at one time, instead of making individual bracha on every mitzvah, he will say al hamitzvahs, and it'll Zokt Rashi kegoin. He says talis, right, and sukkah and tefillin and lulav. Rashi himself holds that Melechas Cholamoid is deraisa, and yet Rashi says Cholamoid hoyelefon of mitzvahs habe is kegoin tefillin and lulav, right? So you see that Rashi, although Rashi holds that Cholamoid is also b'mlocha min haTorah, but still Rashi holds that Cholamoid is chayav tefillin. Okay, so I noticed many years ago I asked this, and I saw that in the Sefer on the Shiur, Rabbi Yashiv mentions it, and he has several different alternatives. But I just saw last week, Megilas Chus al Yedei Zakai, that I just saw last week that in Siman Lamed, Rabbi Akiva Eiger asks it. And Rabbi Akiva Eiger says that although Rashi holds that Melechas Cholamoid are deraisa, but nevertheless Rashi holds that Cholamoid is chayav in tefillin, because evidently Rashi holds that the tefillin, yes or no, aren't totally in melocha. It's totally in os, whether there is an os or not an os. Okay, so it could be that Cholamoid is also from melocha. And zokt the Yerushalmi. This is what the Yerushalmi says, that those melochas which are tzorech hayom are mutter. Right, it's mutter. So Memela, the Kvarim are makdim and liyom haknisa, and whatever they have to do on Purim for the tzorach hayom, they're allowed to do. And it's interesting that the Taz says even that in Purim he says a pragmatia, which is business, selling, buying. He says it's mutter because he says it's like a binyan shel simcha. If you make money, it's a binyan shel simcha. Right? You don't. It's not so much a simcha, I imagine. Right? Okay. Al Koponim, this is the Lemberger Rov and the Osameach hold Ledin that even if Purim is mamish also is also ba'asiyas malacha or metam the minig the way that we have, but it's only in the daytime and not in the nighttime, right? Okay. The Rov Gedol Achronim are not maskim to this at all. There's a Pnei Yeshua, you remember in Daf Daled, when Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, the Gemara brings the Maimer, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Chayav Odom Likros es HaMegilah Balayla B'Lashanoisa Bayom. He brings that, which we're going to discuss later, and Rabbi Notam in Tosfos has a shaila, do you say Shechiyonu again in the daytime? Do you say Shachiyah, since you said Shachiyonu at night on the Megillah, do you repeat Shachiyonu in the daytime? And the Rif and the Rambam say no, because you said the Shachiyonu at night, You don't say Shechionu 2 times for one mitzvah. Sukkah, lulav, shofar, you say 1 time. Even the second day of Rosh Hashanah, it's a question, right? Also the same, and Machlokes, the Rif and the Rambam, Rabbeinu Tam says yes. Because Rabbeinu Tam says that the Iker Shechionu, the Iker Kriyas HaMegillah is in the daytime, so maybe you say Shechionu in the daytime as well. Okay, and that's what that's the sheet of Toises, the Rosh Rabbeinu Tam. Okay. It says that Iker Kriyas HaMegillah is in the daytime. Ad kedei kach, that we're going to see that was a question, what is the actual takona, the actual mitzvah of Kriyas Megillah Balayla? Because the first mention that we have of Kriyas Megillah Balayla is Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. He says, Chayav Adam Liklis Megillah Balayla V'la Shanoisa Bayoim. And it doesn't say that it doesn't say any place in the Mishnah. No, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi he was a Tana and an Amora. He was really the end of the Tanoim, the beginning of the Amoraim. But it doesn't say. That's why we can say on Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi a Maimah, not a Memra. An Amora is a Memra. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, we can call it a Maimah, right? Because the Rebbe is Maimah, right? Because he was a Tana, okay. But before that, we see no mention of it, nothing whatsoever. Ad kedei kach that the Ran asks in the beginning of the Masechta, the Bnei Kforim that are makdim and liyom haknisa, right? Why were they makdim liyom haknisa? They come to the cities for mishpat to sell the produce in the markets, whatever, because the Kforim live from the Ayoras and the Ayoras live from the Kforim. Right? If they come in the morning of the Yom HaKnisa, what do they do with the Megillah Shalayla? What do they do? When do they read it? Dr. Ran says that they don't read it at night, because he says that since it's not the Iker mitzvah of the Kriyas HaMegillah is in the daytime and not at night, when the Chachamim allowed them to be Makdim Lo Yom HaKnisa, the Chachamim patted them, the Anshe Knesset Agdola, Mordechai and Esther, patted them from the Megillah Shalayla. That's what he says. There's a sheet on the side, on the Rif, there's the Shitas Ribab. The Shitas Ribab disagrees very strongly. He says, no, there's no difference. And he said that they had to read it. He said someone read it for them. He didn't read it so well, whatever it was. Or they had to come to the city at night to read the Megillah. But Al Kaponim, he argues with the Ran, and he said they read in the day, and they have to read at night also, because the Chachamim never couldn't patter them from the Megillah Shalayla. Zok the Pnei Yeshua says that if the Megillah Shalayla, even if it's not a takona of Mordechai and Esther, it's not Medivre Kabbalah, it's only a Darabon Dika takona from later, either from the Tanoim or from Yeshua ben Levi. But Al Koponim, he said on a takonas Chachamim, you can make a bracha. And Heichen Sivonu, by the Ner Chanukah, right? And the Gemara has 2 opinions. Okay. And then Zok the Pnei Yeshua goes on, and the Pnei Yeshua says, he says that there's a mistake in the understanding. The Pnei Yeshua says that at night, whether Megillah at night is as important as in the daytime, whether it's the same takon of the Nevi'im or not, but he says nevertheless, it doesn't matter, because this is Purim is a Yom Tov. And he says, Ad kedei kach, that we paskin, that the Mechaber holds in Yoredeya, not like in Arachaim, that Purim, there's no Avelis Noeg on Purim, that Purim is doicha, it's not mevatel, but it's doicha the Avelis Shiva like Shabbos, and Memele, if it's a Yontav enough to be doicha the Avelis, right, on that, so Memele it's a Yontav, and you have to say Shechiyonu at night on the Kedushas Hayom, even if without the Kriyas HaMegillah, even before there was a Kriyas Megillah at night. And he said, but now the Chachamim, just like the Chazman is Omra Afila B'Shuk, but the Chachamim said to say it better on the Koshel Kiddush, so Memela we say it on the Megillah. Just like Yom Kippur we say it right, by Kol Nidrei. So Memela he says that it's a tos. He says it's a tos, and it's even Rabbeinu Tam, because he said the Shechiyonu at night is on the Yom Tov, like any Yom Tov. And in the daytime, it's on the mitzvah of the Megillah. He says it doesn't matter what the level of chiyuv at night on the Megillah is, but he said that the Shechayon at night isn't because of the Megillah, it's because of the Yontiv. Okay? So he says that therefore, he says, I mean, he doesn't want to say the Rif and the Rambam are wrong, but he says the Rabbeinu Tam is right, that you have to say Shechayono, but Veloy Metame, because it doesn't pertain to the Megillah as such, it pertains to the Yontiv. Okay. So obviously, it's obvious that the Pnei Yeshua held not like the Lemberger Rov or like the Meshech Chochma. He holds that if there's an Issa Melocha, if there's any Kedushas Hayom, it's at night, as in the daytime. There's no difference. And another Al Pishnayim Eidim Yokum Dover, another of the Gedola Achronim, which is the Chadmin Kamoy, the Tureyev, and the Shagasaya, says the same thing. He doesn't speak so much about the Shechayono, but he says, called the Tikkun Rabbonin Kenderaisa Tikkun. And he says that which the evidently there were Achronim at that time, even Rishonim at that time, that held evidently that they said something like the Lemberger Rav says, and he says no. He said it's a mistake because the memra of Rabba Barova, who says that Sudas Purim Sha'achla Balayla is Layotzi Dechavosa, because he made mistake, said it has nothing to do with the Kedushas Hayom. It has nothing to do with the Yontiv. He says that Purim there's a specific mitzvah of Simcha, Mishta and Simcha, and that is Yemei Mishta of Simcha. That's in the daytime. And he says just like Yontiv, the Shalosh Golim, when is the mitzvah of Simcha? In the daytime, right? Other than the Voyisa Ach Sameach is L'Rabbas Leile Yontav Achron, if not for that Chiddush, there wouldn't be Simcha, Achiv Simcha on the night of Leile Yontav Achron either, right? And not on the first night, and not on any other night. The dims, the Chiv, the mitzvah Simcha on Yom Tovim is in the daytime. So Memela, and even Shavuos, which is only one day, there's the mitzvah of Simchas in the daytime, not at night. Memela was up to Tureyeven, that can the Reise ticken, so the Chachamim were Mesaken, the Nevi'im were Mesaken, that Purim should be like Atzeres, like Shavuos, that although it's only one day, and the Kedushas Hayom and the Yontiv is in the entire day, Miboyev Ad Seisar, but the mitzvah of Simcha is like Yom Tovim, Ken the Reise, it's in the daytime, Yemei Mishta v'Simcha. Right? That's what the Torah Yavin says. And so it's very clear that the Yerushalmi, because even though the Yerushalmi at first wanted to bring a raya that Purim is mutter b'asiyas melocha because hoyo kosvo, but the maskon and the Yerushalmi is certainly like that. Not like that. The Yerushalmi says it's mutter because even if it's also b'melocha, but it's not worse than cholamoid, not different than cholamoid. So you see the Yerushalmi, the Pnei Yeshua, and the Turei Even definitely rejected this svara that the Meshech Chochma and Lemberger Rav said, that they wanted to be mochiach from Yemei Mishta v'Simcha, that they wanted to be mochiach from Yemei Mishta v'Simcha, that Purim, the Isser Meloch on Purim is only in the daytime, and they said, behechlet not. It's not like that. So I wanted to, one thing I'm rushing. That's why I wrote everything down, so we should be able to move fast, so I can have you out of here by 12 o'clock. Okay. V'nahafachu Yemei Mishta v'Simcha Sudas Purim she'ochla b'layla lo yotze yidei chavoso. Right? Okay. So doesn't and al pi that the Lemberger Rav and the Meshech Chochma wanted to conclude that the nighttime of Purim is not a yontiv, it's not also basiyas melocha, doime to the Sudas Purim shachla balayla, right? V'nahafachu. Okay. You know, I'll tell you that how can we ask, we're asking on the Lemberger Rav or on the Meshech Chochma, But I heard once from an old Rav that he was in Brisk, and he said that Reb Chaim Brisker said something, and the little Rav from a little town not him ungefragt. But the ungefragt Reb Chaim, how could it be? I couldn't. So one of the Rabbonim he said, this is Reb Chaim is a wolfish, and he can't swim in shallow water. He needs deep waters. So they're talking about, there's a whale, and a whale has to swim in the depths. He can't swim, near to the shore. He gets stuck. So it's Reb Chaim is a wolfish. That's what they said. Right? But these for Lemberger Rov and for the Meshech Chochma, this is a little bit, this is Sichas Chulin Shatam Zeh Chachamim. So it's not Al Koponim V'Nahafachu. What does the Gemara bring a raya that Ravashi have a Yosef Kamed der Rav Kahana, Udo Ameimar, it depends on, and Nagivelo Oser Rabbonon. It was Purim, in the afternoon in Yudalet, and they're sitting there and it's getting the day it's the end of the day, and then no one shows up for the Seder, for learning. Zokter of Kahana, Matam lo Oser Rabban, where is everybody? So Rashi told him, Dil mitri the Rabbonim, they're busy. What it's Purim in the afternoon. They're oisik b'mitzvah Sudas Purim. So Rav Kahana said, and remember from Baba Kamen, from the Toysus and everybody, that Rav Kahana was the greatest charif, that Rav Yochanan couldn't even keep up with him. And Rav Kahana said, why didn't they eat the Sudas Purim last night? So Rav Asher Tamon cooked and he said, Lo shmir le'lemar, that Rava said Purim shochla Sudas Purim shochla balayla is lo yotze yidei chavosa. Didn't Rava say you're not yotze with the Sudas Purim? So then the Gemara says that Rav Kahana chazed it over 40 times. Okay? Al Koponim, until Rava's time, no one thought that Sudas Purim Shochla Balayla is lo yotze yidei chavosa. No one thought such a thing. And why is Sudas Purim Shochla Balayla lo yotze yidei chavosa? It's a matter of the speculation, because in Siman Hey in Choshen Mishpat it says that the din is that din in a foshus you're not maskil biyom. You're gormen biyom, but you're not maskil biyom. So there, the Shach and the Sma talk about why can't you be maschil din a foshus din momentus biyom? So it said maybe it's because it's dark, right? It's dark, and you can't be ma'ayin properly, and you can't, right? And therefore the Shach and the Smach have a clan. They don't come to a maskona that the Shach wants to know. And what if maybe you have electricity or you have enough candles? Maybe then the din doesn't apply. Maybe then needs even maskil and biyam. They don't say it din, but it's okay. And I saw even, and I wrote it, I don't remember, years ago I saw in the Sefer that he wanted to know, he also had the same chakira, that could you be yotze the Surah Purim Balayla if you have candles, if it's light. Why? Because meimosai korin as hashma ba'avin misho sheha'oni nichnas lechol pitay. Right? Why does the oni go mibayom to eat his meager meal? Because he has no candles. Right? And then the Gemara said that a suma is oichel ve'eno saveya, because you have to see what you're eating. We'll see what. So memela, it's not halacha l'Moshe Messina hilchos l'balataima that Sudas Purim shochla b'layla yotzei chavosa. So Rav Kahana didn't know it. No, so memela is okay. This is mamish nahapachu from the Lemberger Rav. Because Rav Kahana thought until the time of Rava that Sudas Purim Shochla B'Layla is Yotze Yedei Chavosa. Why? Only then Rava came and he was Machadish Yemei Mishte V'Simcha. Okay? How could you be Mekayim the Sudas Purim B'Layla if it's not Yontif? What chalois does such a Suda have if it's not Yontif? So Adarabah, that raya that they bring from Sudas Purim Shachar V'Layla is lo Yotze Yedei Chavosai. Adar V'Nahafachu, that's a raya that Yotze Yedei Chavosai. Because Rav Kahana thought, he said, why aren't the Rabbanan here learning? Couldn't they make the Sudas Purim last night? Well, he didn't know the Joshua you made Mishta V'Simcha. But you see from there that Avada, that it's Yontev at night, it's an Issa Malach at night, and Memela, if not for the Gzeres HaKosov of Yemei Mishta V'Simcha, you would be Yotze the Sudas Purim at night as well. Okay? You remember, Ein Bein Yontev L'Shavas Elo Oichel Nefesh Bilvad. Right? That's the Mishnah here in the Ein Bein. And also in the end of Beitza. Ein Bein Yontev L'Shavas Elo Oichel Nefesh Bilvad. Right? But it's not true. What do you mean, Ein Bein Yontev L'Shavas Elo Oichel Nefesh Bilvad? Don't we say that Metoch Shutra HaTzoel L'Tzorech Hutra Namish Shaloi L'Tzorech? Metoch Shehutra Havora L'Tzorech Hutra Namish Shaloi. And many, Elo Zokt, the Rambam, and the Yerushalmi says that Befer Zokt the Rambam, the Perish HaMishnayos, that Mishnah is Alibet Beis Shammai, because Beis Shammai doesn't hold Metoch. If Beis Shammai would hold Metoch, so Memela, the Ein Bein, the only difference is, right, the only difference is Oichel Nefesh. And the Gemara says, Ma'il Delok Rab Yehuda, because the Mishnah wasn't Mata Machshirin either. Okay? And then the Gemara says, maybe not, we're not sure, but Al Kolponim, that Mishnah goes like by Shammai. No, Rabbeinu HaKodesh brought the Mishnah, he wrote the Mishnah in Mesachtes Megilah, he wrote that in Beitza, and Beis Shammai, B'mokom, Beis Hillel is Eina Mishnah. Nevertheless, Rabbeinu HaKodesh had a reason that he brought the Mishnah. And it said and that which the Rambam says in the Perish HaMishnayos, the Yerushalmi says Beferish, that it goes according to Beis Shammai, and because of that, since Rabbeinu HaKodesh was Mesaderet in his Mishnayos, even though Beis Shammai b'mokom Beis Hillel is Eina Mishnah, the Yerushalmi once, Rabbi Yochanan said, maybe in certain issues of Mitoich we should be machmer, because maybe Rabbeinu HaKodesh meant to be meramez, that the Metoich isn't such a clear, unlimited heter. That's what they show. The Ner Shlav Tola, the Rabbeinu Hananel brings it in Beitza. Okay. Now, I have a little bit of a question. For this, I have to thank Rabbi Goldstein. I'm fortunate to participate all these many years in his Shiurim. He's learning Rebbe Lezer de Mila now. If Purim was also Basias Melocha, right? Acha sheyeyocha l'chol nefesh hu levado yeyosa lachem. Called the Tikkun Rabbanan, can the Raisa Tikkun, right? Acha sheyeyocha l'chol nefesh. Now, hu levado hu v'lo machshirin, right? Machshirin mitzvah aren't doicha Shabbos. Not Doicha Yontif, right? However, it's not so simple, because there is a Tana, and we would even say that perhaps the greatest of all the Tanoim, right? And he was the Tana that the Gavra, right? The Mistafina Menei, that was Rebbe Lezer Agodol, that the Baskol came and said in Daf Nun Zayin, Ma lochem eitzel Rebbe Lezer shalocha kemoise b'chol mokum. Right? No, and Rebbe Lezer holds that machshirei mila doicha Shabbos. Machshirei, am I right, Rebbe Goldstein? Machshirei dululev doicha Shabbos. Right? Machshirei mitzvah doicha Shabbos. Right? Not machshirei mezuzah, not machshirei, but those that have a zman kavua, that have to be done dafke today, the machshirei doicha Shabbos. Right? Right? So let me ask you a question. If Purim would be also Basias Melocha, right? And it's not clear, in Bavli it's pretty clear that they weren't Makabal Basias Melocha. In Yerushalmi it's not so certain, okay? If Purim would be also Basias Melocha, right? They really are Isa Basias Melocha. And a Yid didn't have a Megillah on Purim. What would Rebbe Lezer say he should do? Sit and cry about it?
No, right.
Write a Megillah. Because Rebbe Lezer holds that Machshirei Mitzvah are Doicha, Shabbos, and Yom Tov, right? So Memele, if the Yid didn't have the Megillah, and he didn't know what am I going to do? What would Rebbe Eliezer tell him? Write the Megillah. And if he wouldn't do it, right, it would be Shaloi B'Ratzoin Rebbe Eliezer, right? And doesn't Rabbi Yitzchak say, am I right, that Rabbi Yitzchak says, Achas Hoyse Beretz Yisrael, and they did like Rebbe Eliezer, and they would Mechalel Shabbos for the Machshire Mitzvah, and they, because of that, they were Zoiche to manifest brachas, right? Because they did like Rebbe Eliezer. Why? Because the Bas Kol never said that the halacha isn't like Rebbe Eliezer. It just says Malachem Eitzel Rebbe Eliezer, right? And even that which we say, because Achrei Rabbim Lahatos, that was only later. Rabbi Yirmiyah said that that's what the Bas Kol meant. They didn't know what the Bas Kol meant. The Bas Kol just told them Malachem, and Omad Rabbi Yishmael Ragli didn't want to accept it. But the Bas Kol wasn't wrong. It was just a question if Bashamayim or not Bashamayim. But the Bas Kol knew exactly what it was talking about. And if Rebbe Eliezer was Rebbe Eliezer HaGodol, and Rebbe Akiva was Nichna to Rebbe Eliezer, and he tore his flesh at the time of Rebbe Elezer's Petir Alshei Adom Shoises, right? And Rebbe Eliezer was the Godol Shepetanoim. Rebbe Eliezer says that Machshirei Mitzvah Doicha Shabbos. So if the Megillah, if Purim is also Vasiyas Melocha, and a Yid doesn't have the Megillah, what does he do for me? He writes the Megillah, right? He writes the Megillah. Okay, so Memele, if Rabbeinu HaKodesh, a few Mishnayos before Rabbeinu HaKodesh was Koveya, a Mishnah, like Beis Shammai, even though Beis Shammai b'mokom Beis Hillel is a Mishnah, but for what amazing Tam Shiyah, Rabbeinu HaKodesh was Koveya, the Mishnah, like Beis Shammai, right? Not like Beis Hillel. So why is it Min HaNimna that a few Mishnayos later he wasn't Koveya like Rebbe Eliezer? That the Mishnah of Hoya Kosva goes like Rebbe Eliezer, that Machshirei Mitzvah are Doiche Yontef, Doiche Shabbos.
That's the extreme opposite. How could he do that?
Why?
By Shimon from one hand and Rebbe Eliezer that's more Michael than Yehuda on the other hand?
No, it's in different things altogether. But I'm saying that if he took like the das that's not accepted.
He's a machmer, he's not a Michael.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What does it matter? You understand? Rebbe held this way, and I'll tell you, okay, I hear what you're saying, but listen, Eli's always on the ball, right? The say.
Shammai holds Rebbe Eliezer from Shmute, from Shammai.
Yeah.
It's not a Shammai.
What?
That Rebbe Eliezer was from
Shammai. Yeah. Okay. However, there's in the same Gemara, I have a little bit of a shtickle that I don't know how to say it, that Rebbe wanted to hold like Rebbe Eliezer because maybe he lost it, love of the din would be like Rebbe Eliezer, maybe the Bezdin of Mordechai held like Rebbe Eliezer, right? Okay? The same sugya, it says that a Maisa, that Shochu v'lo hevi izemel, and the Rebbe said that they brought the Izemel derech Reshus Harabim, right? They brought the Izemel derech Shaloi B'Tzoin Chachamim. Because the Chachamim held that Machshirei Mitzvah aren't Doiche, Machshirei Mitzvah aren't Doiche. You can't bring the Izemel derech Reshus Harabim. Okay? Then, but Rebbe said they did it Shaloi B'Tzoin Chachamim. Like Rebbe Eliezer, right? So the Gemara says Rabbi Yehuda HaGoizer, who Rabbi Yehuda was given a moil, he said Lo Kachoya Maisa, that it was a Darabonan, that it was a Movui, and the Izemel was on one end of the Movui and the baby was on the other, and they made the bridge. They brought the Izemel from one end of the Movui to the other, and the Milah was in the Movui itself. Okay. So it's a little bit. I permit myself. It's a little bit. And the Rashi is a difficult Rashi. It's a very, very difficult Rashi because that assumes that they weren't Goizer and a Mavui, right? Okay. There's no hechrach in the Gemara when the Gemara says that Rabbi Yehuda Goizer said Lo Kai Chaya Maisa. There's no hechrach that all the Amoraim were makabel that. Then it could be that when Rebbe said the Maisa with the Milah, that they brought the Milah, the Sakin, Derech Reshus Harabim, Shaloi B'Tzoin Chachamim, it could be that the Rebbe himself was maskim to that, and he himself held that was the din, right? It was Shaloi B'Tzon Chachamim. He doesn't say what his own, his own opinion. He was very too diplomatic. He didn't say what his own opinion is. But it could be that what Rabbi Yehuda Goizer said later on, that Lo Kachaya Maisa, it doesn't say necessarily that all of the Amoraim agreed with that. It could be that Rabbeinu HaKodesh would say, no, Rabbi Yehuda Goizer, you're wrong. The Maisa was as I'm saying. Because we haven't, what you're saying means that we have to clarify the status of the Mavoi, which we haven't done yet. The Rishus Harabim, we know that this is what Rebbe Lezer holds. Right? So Memela, I don't want to riot, certainly not, but it's a little bit of a smuchim to say that Rebbe Lezer, that Rabbeinu HaKodesh may hold like Rebbe Lezer. He may hold like Rebbe Lezer, and if so, Rabbeinu HaKodesh was Koveya, the Mishnah of HaKosev, right? That Hoya Kosva, he was a Koveya, that Mishnah, like Rebbe Lezer, just like it was a Koveya, the other Mishnah like Beis Shammai. It doesn't, one is, you're right, one is L'chumra, one is L'chumra, but it doesn't matter. He was Koveya like Beis Shammai, even though it's saying a Mishnah. He was Koveya, this, like Rebbe Lezer, because he held like that. Or even if he didn't hold like that, he had some reason that he was Koveya, that Mishnah like Rebbe Lezer. So Memela, in that case, if that's the way that we're going to learn the Mishnah, either that the Meleches Purim are mutter, like Meleches Cholamoid are mutter l'tzorach yontiv, or else that the Mishnah goes like Rebbe Lezer, or whatever, then avada, then there's no raya whatsoever, this way or that way, whether Purim is mutter b'seh, because it's talking about something entirely different. There's an entirely different sugya there. It's an entirely different hectare. So I understand. I'm not just saying that there's a raya berura that Rabbeinu HaKodesh held like Rebbe Lezer, but it's not certain that he was makabel what Rabbi Yehuda Goizer said, because what Rabbi Yehuda Goizer said, if you think about it, is more shver than what Rebbe Lezer has a clear hectare. He has a clear head. According to what Rabbi Yehuda Goizer said, remember we had the Rashi, you were explaining the Rashi, that it means that they brought the Izemel from one end of the Movoi, they made the bris in the Movoi, and they brought it from one end to the, which we haven't really been mevara that's really mutter. So it could be that Rabbeinu HaKodesh held, no, that the Maisa was like that, and whoever did it was held like Rebbe Lezer, and he may agree with it. He may be, I don't want to say, but he may be sympathetic to it. I'll put him to the point where he could have brought that Mishnah, Hoya Kosu Magia, like Alibi Rebbe Lezer.
That's why the Bavli doesn't ask this question like the Shammai. Because the Bavli
because it was a settled issue. There was no issue. The Bavli knew very, very well that it was either like Meleches Cholamoid or else the Mishnah was going according to Rebbe Lezer. There's other reasons also, but again, it's the time is a factor. Okay. Bichlal, the din, the Lemberger Rav's din, is very, very difficult because we're saying that he wrote the Megillah. He wanted that he wrote the Megillah at night, and there's no Yisra Malocha. But that in itself, if it could be that that the takon of the Megillah Shalayla wasn't even knowing in the time of the Tanoim. We'll see in a moment. Then it's not a definite teretz. Then Al Koponim, certainly from the Gedolei Achronim, the Gedolei Achronim certainly aren't maskim to that. Okay. Whatever it is, whatever the takona of Megillah Shalayla was, it's not mentioned in the Mishnah. It could, we'll see if it was noig in the time of the Tanoim or not, we'll see. But it wasn't mentioned in the Mishnah, no place. Later on, we'll see that there was Rashi holds it is mentioned, but till now, we have no mention of the Megillah Shalayla in the Mishnah. Okay. So now, if there's no place in the Mishnah that Megillah Shalayla is mentioned, right? It's not brought any place in the Mishnah. So why should we go a Pirza Dechuka and say that the Mishnah of Hayakosva was talking about the Megillah Shalayla, which isn't mentioned even in any Mishnah? Understand? Why would the Mishnah Megillah Shalayla be addressing writing a Megillah at night for the Megillah Shalayla? And what kavanah do you need? What are you talking about kavanah? You know? And the Shuas Yankiv himself says, based on Mogan Avram and Simon Samach, he said that Avada, he said that the Megillah Shalayla would not need kavanah, mitzvah saying tzrichas kavanah for a mitzvah darabonim like that. Al Kol Ponim, we're going to discuss a little bit the Megillah Shalayla, and we're going to see that the Gedolei Rishonim, some of them held that the Megillah Shalayla was at least in the time of the Tanoim, and some even held that it was also the Zakona of Mordechai and Esther, which leaves us with a question of if the Megillah Shalayla was also part of the Takon of the Divrei Kabbalah, what was left for Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi to be Mesaken? Chayav Adam Liksus Megillah Balayla Shanoy Sabayon, right? What was left for him to be Mesaken? The Yerushalmi, in the second parak, and it says that Rabbi Lezer b'Shem Rabbi Chanina Rogel Sorech L'Krosa Balayla V'Lashanoy Sabayon. That Rabbi Chanina, that Rabbi Lezer said in the name of Rabbi Chanina Rogel, that Chayev Odem Likros es HaMegillah Balayla B'Lashanoy Sabayon, which is the same Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said. No, who was Rabbi Chanina Rogel? So I looked in the Seder Hadoros, Rabbi Chil Michal Halpern. There's no recorded Rabbi Chanina Rogel. There may be 30 Rabbi Chaninas, but not Rabbi Chanina Rogel. So in the Korban Moed and the Pnei Moshe, they say there are two perushim. One is Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Chanina Rogel. This was his name. His name was Chanina Rogel. And he says exactly what Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, and there's another parish, and it says Rabbi Lezer Mishum Rabbi Chanina Rogel, that if a person is Rogel and he knows how to read the Megillah, then he should read it at night as well. But if he's not a Rogel, he doesn't have to bother. Like the Ran said in the beginning, that the B'nai Kfarim, that Amaktim li Amaksi Knisa Potem Megillah Shalayla. It would change the din radically. There's only a Rogel. If you're not a Rogel, you don't have to bother. Most of the Achronim, first thing, I never saw not the Pnei Yeshua, not the Turei Even, not the Bnei Yisosra. No one brings this Yerushalmi. I don't know why. No one brought the Yerushalmi. Not the Pri Megodim. No one brings the Yerushalmi. But it's more mistaber. That's what the Pnei Moshe says. It's more mistaber that Rabbi Yehuda Rogel was his name, and he's saying the same din as Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Okay. No, if you say, however, you say that Rabbi Yehuda Rogel, that Rabbi Chanina says, Kama, Rogel is Chayev L'Krosa Balayla, that only if you're a Rogel, so it would be a very, 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 very different din. Because we say that why don't you read the Megillah when Purim is Shabbos? Because Hakol Chayovim B'Kriyas HaMegillah Ben Hakol B'Kiyim, right? And Shemayelech Eitzel Aboki, right? So Memela Hanatam is the Shoifer and the Tam is the Lulav, right? Okay, if you hold that Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Chanina said Rogel, that who's Chayev Balayla is only a Rogel, Memela there's no Hakol Chayovim. So it could be a Heichatimsa that if Purim is Shabbos, the nighttime Megillah you could read, right? The Rogel could read. Why? Because there's no Gezerah D'Rabbah. The Gezerah D'Rabbah is only of Hakol Chayovim, right? An Odom Bowl, right? But over here, since it's only Rogel, so Memela there's no Chashash of Shema Yavireno, because it's not Bowl, right? Okay. And the Turei Even says, I'm saying the Lemberger Rav says, not on this because he doesn't bring the Yerushalmi, but the Lemberger Rav says that Inyan something else, which I don't want to go into too much, what the Tumas Hadeshin, the Mechaber brings, that you can read the Megillah Meplag Mincha. So he says, the Lemberger Rav says that if Purim would be Shabbos, and you would be Mekabel Shabbos Meplag Mincha, and you would read the Megillah from Plag Mincha, right? So Mamela, where there's no, and there's no, it's only an Esther, there's no Lo Sasa, so Mamela the Gzera de Rabba wouldn't be Chal until Seis HaKachovim, right? Okay? So you read the Megillah Friday Mebod Yom, right? So Mamela there would be no Gzera de Rabba, because it's only mitzvah saseh, there's no mitzvah lo saseh, and then he says, and you would be able to read it the next day already also, because since you read it once, there's no chshasha miyelech etz laboki. That's what the Lemberger Rav says. Okay, but he doesn't bring the Yerushalmi. All right. However, from Rashi, you see 100% not like this. Rashi is a different sheet altogether. The Mishnah says that Ben Ir sholach lakrach or Ben krach sholach leir, imosid lachtel mekoy mekorev ki mekoy imlav korimon. Someone goes from Bnei Brak, he goes to Yerushalayim to Bnei Brak. When does he read the Megillah? Right? It's very confusing. All right. So Rava takes, according to Rashi, Rava takes the case of Ben Krach Sholach Leir. He says, Lo Shonu, Elo Shosid Lachse Beleile Yudal Rav Leino, Osid Lachse Beleile Rabba Osa Kore Imoyem. A Ben Krach, who his day is 15, he goes to an ear, which the day is 14. Now what does he do? He's a Ben Krach, he's not a Ben ear, but today he had to be in the ear. So the Rava teaches the Mishnah this way. It goes like this. Im osid lachza, if on the night, if he is intending to leave the city before daytime on the 14th, then he did not yet lose his status as a Ben Krach. And he reads the Megillah on the 15th. Since he's not going to be, he was only there the night of the 14th, but he's not going to be there the day of the 14th. So he reads the Megillah, he still is a Ben Krach. Okay? And Rashi says, V'kori imoyem ben balel yudaled, ben biyudaled, if he intends to be there in the daytime on Yudaled, then he reads at night with them and he reads with them in the daytime. But if he intends to go back before the daytime of Yudaled, then he still remains as a Ben Krach and he reads the Megillah on Tesvav, even if for some reason he has to remain in the city. This is already a question in what Rashi means. Okay. The Rashi says that he reads Belaylo Beyom, whether he remains a Ben Krach or remains a Ben Iya. Right? The Rashi says that it's all determined by what the Gemara says, the Rava said it's determined by what his intention is, what he's going to do in the day of the Yudalit. In other words, if before the Netzachama of Yudalit he leaves the city, he's still a Ben Krach. But if he remains in the city after the Netzachama on Yudalit, then he's a Ben Yer. And because of that, he would have to read Yudalit at night with them and in the daytime. Okay, very good. Correct. The Turazov, the Taz. In Tofresh Peches, correct the Taz. Why was Rava Tolei this din? He said that he leaves the Krach and he comes to the city. Is he approves Ben Yomo for that day or not? Why was Rava said if he intends to leave before the Netzachama, then he never loses his status as a Ben Krach. If he intends to leave to be there after the Netzachama, then he's a Ben Yer. Okay? Correct? The Taz, what about the Megilas Shalayla? You're only talking about the Megilas Shal Yom. So why do we say that if he intends to be there all night and he leaves by the Netzachama, he's still a ben krach. But if he intends to leave, or he leaves, right, at night, and he's not there by the Netzach Hama, he's still a ben krach. And what about the Megilas? Why shouldn't it be the Shkias Hachama? Zok that the Taz says a gewaldige Chidish din, and the Mogen Avram argues with it because you see, Poshet, the Mogen Avram didn't understand the Lomdus in the Taz. You see, because others say it as well. Zok the Mogen Avram that no, Zok the Taz that no, he's talking about the Megilas Shalayla, not the Megilas Shalyom. But the Megilas Shalayla is the Zman B'de'evid is till the Netzach Hama. Why? Because don't we have the din that Pa'amim Sha'adam Koire Kriya Shema, right? 2 times before the Netzach Hama and before the Alois, after the Alois HaShachar and after the Alois HaShachar, and he's Yotzei Mishum Yom and Laila. The Kriya Shema Shel Laila, right? You can be Yotzei B'de'evid B'shas Chak until the Netzach Hama. Le'olam, the Gemara's maskone, Le'olam is Yomama, because after the Alois HaShachar is Yom for other mitzvahs. But because Kriya Shema is Toli and B'shoch B'cha, and Ika Inshe Degone B'ashata, people are still asleep at the time after the. So Memela by Kriya Shema, the Torah says that the Kriya Shema Shalayla can be even B'shas Hatchak until the Netzach Hama, even though it's Yom. And then after the Netzach Hama, you learn Kriya Shema Shal Shach. Zok the Taz, that the Megilas Shalayla is the same, that when they were Masakin, Megilas Shalayla, they were Masakin with that kula of Kriya Shema, that the Megilas Shalayla you can be Yoitze until the Netzach Hama. So Memela Zok the Taz, when Rava said Lo Shonu, that when does he become a Ben Krach? When does he become Ois Ben Krach and become a Ben Ir? Only if he's going to be out of there by the Netzach Hama. He wasn't referring to the Megilas Shalayla, he was referring to the Megilas Shalayla. Because since the Megilas Shalayla, the Shas Chak the Zman is until the Netzach Hama like Kriya Shema, right? So Memela, if he's there till the Netzach Hama, he's considered already a Ben Ir, the Inyan, the Megilas Shalayla, and he's approves Ben Yoma. Okay? The Mogen Avram didn't agree with it, but that was the din of the Taz. Okay? And he learns it in Rashi. Okay? He learns it in Rashi. So Memela, Rava said that the Mishnah said that a Ben Krach Shalach Le'ir, under certain circumstances, he can have the status of a Ben Ir. Zokt Rava Lo Shonu, right? Lo Shonu, Ella, that he intends to be there till the Netzach Hama. Not Le'inyan the Megilah Shal Yom, but Le'inyan the Megilah Shal Laila, because Laila Le'inyan Megilah extends to the Netzach Hama, right? It goes till the Netzach Hama. What does Lo Shonu mean? What is Lo Shonu? What does it mean? Lo Shonu means, Lo Shonu is an exclusive Lashon which refers only to a Mishnah. Lo Shonu, Mishnah, right? When did the Mishnah say that the Ben Krach loses his status as a Ben Krach and becomes a Ben Ir? Lo Shonu, right? Only if he remains in the ear till the Netzach Hama, right? Then he's a Ben Ir, he's a Cruz, he's a Cruz Ben Yoma. So Memela, if he says Lo Shonu, so he means that the Mishnah was talking about the Mishnah, the Megilah Shalayla. Understand? The Mishnah was talking about Megilah Shalayla because it says Rava doesn't say B'med Dvarim Amurim. Rava says Lo Shonu. And remember, we have a klal. Tosfos says in many places, Rashi says that the Amoraim were much more mefarish and much clearer in their expression than the Tanoim, because that was the Amora was. Everything had to be clear. Right? Baramolalo, right? We're finishing right away. Baramolalo, right? Set it back a few minutes, okay? I'm still better than Trump. You know? Yeah, I'm ahead of Trump.
You're not done yet.
What? He's not either. You know? So Memela, if he says Lo Shonu, what does it mean? The Mishnah. So now, does the Mishnah refer and acknowledge the Megillah Shalala? Yes, because Lo Shanu. Because the Mishnah says that when do you become a Prush Ben Yoma? If you intend to be there by the Netzach Hama for the Megillah Shalala. So the Mishnah mentions Megillah Shalala in conjunction with the Prush Ben Yoma. Okay? Right, okay. So now, let's see, we'll skip a few pages, I think. Okay. No, that sugya in Brochas that Reb Shimon Bar Yochai said that pa'amim sha'odem koire kriyashma pamayim before the nets and after the nets, and he can be yoytze mishum arvis and shum shachres. Who was the Amoira that was maskim to Reb Shimon Ben Yochai, Reb Yeshua ben Levi? The same Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi that says that Chayav Odom Likros as a Megillah Balayla v'Nashnois Bayom, and the Taz learns in Rashi that it's going on the Megillah Shalayla, that the Megillah Shalayla the Zman, the Mishnah meant the Megillah Shalayla the Zman is until the Netzach Hama. That was the same Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi that said that the Zman Krishma Shalayla is bedorchek until the Zman of the Netzach Hama. The same Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, who says Me'ezeh Tam Sheyiyeh, that the Zman of Megillah Shalayla and the Zman Kriyash Shalayla is the same. He has his reason. Okay? The same Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Okay. For one more page, and then we'll call it an evening. No. We still have to determine one thing. If already we've been mochiach that the Megillah Shalayla is at least from the Mishnah, from the Tanoim, then what did Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, what was he mechadesh? What did he chayav adam that we know this, right? We know this already. What was he mechadesh? So here I have a few more lines. Okay. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi's Talmidim, you see, they didn't understand what he said, because at first they thought to learn the Mishnayos, they weren't certain what he meant. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi's Talmidim were asking him from the various Mishnayos, because it says that Kol Hayom is kosher l'kriyas HaMegillah, doesn't mention Megillah Shalayla. L'choyre, the Poshet Pshaten, the Ben Krach Sholach Le'ir, is talking about the Megillah Shel Yom, until we learned the Omer Rav Eloshonu and we understood the Taz's Biur and Rashi. But the Talmidim asked him, they didn't understand that the Poshet Pshat of the Mishnayos is that the Megillah Shalayla doesn't exist in the Mishnah. It's really right. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi told them that no. He says, no, you're wrong, because Rava said Loshonu, and he explained to them as we're saying. And he told them, right, that no, that if you learn the Mishnah properly, and you learn Omar Rava Loshonu properly, you'll see that the Mishnayos recognized that there was the takon of the Megillah Shalayla, at least in the time of the Tanoim, certainly. Okay? All right? Men hat me weitergefragt, and they said, okay, very good. But what was the hechrach Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi had to be machadesh this din in Rava, the Havon in Rava, that the Zman Megillah Shalayla is going to the Zman Kriyashma Shalayla, that it can be until the Netzach Hama, which la'olam yemoma, it's really day, right? It's really day. So why was he machadesh this? So he told them, says, Elaka ekra yomom velosane velayla velodomiyali. Right? He based it on Elaka ekra yomom. I prayed to you, I called to you, and you didn't answer me. Velayla velodomiyali. Right? going to make it very, very brief. Look, the Kodesh HaKadoshim is the Reach Dudoyim. The Reach Dudoyim given the Bnei Yisoscha. Yeah, the Parish on Mesechus Megillah. And he says that really the Pasuk should have said, the Ramel said it, Elaka, Ekra, B'yoim, Uvalayla, right? V'lo Dumiyali. What is it? Ekra, Yom, V'lo Sana, V'layla. Why didn't he say Uvalayla? Ekra, Yom, right? And then Ekra, Yom, V'lo Sana, Layla, Lo Dumiyali. Not Bilay, but Layla. Doctor, very, very, very briefly, he brings that there's a Zman in the day that's not Yom and Lo Laila, right? What was it in the Haggadah? Also Yom, also, what's Yom Shul, Lo Yom, Lo Laila, right? Yeah. What is the Zman of Yom? It's from the Alos HaShachar, the Netzach Hama. What is Laila? Meimos HaKodim, Hashma Ba'avim. There's Yom and there's Laila. Vayirera, Vayavoika. The Tefillah Shel Yom and the Yom, the Tefillah Shel Laila, Laila. Okay? Kriya Shema, because Ika Inshe Degona Beishata, the Torah meant B'shoch B'cha, until B'shas HaTchak, until the Netzach Hama, and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, who was maskim to that din, extends it to the Megillah as well, the Megillah Shel Laila. The same Yeshua ben Levi in Brochas and in Megillah. Zogt Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi that there's a Zman in the day that's not Yom and that's not Laila. And that is, he brings here the Loshen in Zohar HaKodesh, and he says that begin der Chad, Nafkona lo have Zman Zelusa, the Ho Ono Ishtadl Be'oraisa Mipalgas Lailo, he said that it came, the Alos HaShachar, and it wasn't yet the time of Tefillah, that we were learning Torah all night. The Kad Osat Safra Ad Kan Lohoya Idna Litzelusa. He said, and it came the Alos HaShachar, and that's not the Zman of Tefillah. Begin the Bahishata Bekadrusa de Safra Ishtakach Itza Mishtoya Bebala. Because at that time it's the Zman that Isha Misaperes in Bala. That the Gemara says also. What does it mean, Isha? What does the Zohar HaKodesh mean, Isha Misaperes? It means that the Kaveh Yochel, just like the Sholosh Shoyes Rishonos is Oisik B'Toira, the Sholosh Shniyos is Oisik B'Din, there's a Zman that Kadrusa, that Safra, the Zman between the Alos HaShachar and the Netzach Hama, the Kaveh Yochel, Hashem Yisbarach, is Oisek and thinks of the Tzorchei Klal Yisrael. And therefore, Ubeglal Kein lo boy le banash le miksek malayu de mischabren kachada. And therefore, at that time of the time, the Kadrusa de Safra, which is the Zman of the Alos HaShachar, it's not the time we shouldn't be mafsik the Isha Mesaperes in Bala. And therefore, it has many implications. That's why there are many Hasidim that they don't say Slichas by the Alos HaShachar, because it's the Zman of Isha Mesaperes in Bala, and you don't interrupt that with any bakoshes, right? And not only by Hasidim, but I know my Rebbe Soloveitchik also didn't say Slichas then, he said the Slichas at night, before, because he said the Zman that Kadrusa, the Safra, is Isha Misaperes in Bala, right? And Memela, you're not supposed to be mafsik, you keep to the side, and you hope for the best that the Midas Harachamim will be goiver, right? Okay. So Memela, Zokta b'nei Soscha, that the Kadrusa, that Safra, is lo Yom and v'lo Laila, right? And Memela, you have to be very, very careful, and that's why it's not the Zman Tefillah, it's not the Zman Slichas, according to the Al-Pi Zohar HaKodesh, that the Zman Tefillah is in the daytime, the Zman Tefillah Ma'ariv is in the nighttime, but that time the Kadrusa, and it's Isha Mesaperes in Bala, however, we don't understand it, but this is what it is, and Lo Boile Banash LeMifseke, right? We're not mafsek. Aber Leos sucht der Heilige Ben Yisoscher. Aber Leos, I'm finished right away. Shows Hoysa a Sora Leakov. Right? Hine bekavona tzuma dovko al share rachamim. They had no choice but to be mafsik the Isha Mesaperes in Bala. Right? Moshe Moadov Doime, that at the beginning of the Second World War, when the Germans invaded Norway, so the King of Norway called the King of England, it was King George. And there was the officer on duty in Buckingham Palace, the guy cuts in the front and says, the King of Norway, he thought it was a prank. And he said, wake the king up, wake the king, King George, wake him up, because he has to get me and my queen out of here. He has to do something for us. No, you're waking the king and the queen up, right? You're banging on the door. There's a Isha Mesaperes in Bala. Zokte, Avo liyoisha oz hoysa ei Sora leYakov. V'hine bekavona tzuma dovko al share rachamim b'sho halazu shaloi kamishpat. Right? Because it's a kadusa, the tzafra, Isha Mesaperes in Bala, and you shouldn't disturb. But there was no alternative, because it was a time of extreme desperation. Oz nisarer ha'inyan besipar ha'kodesh elyon makol hatzon ba'oznoi oz nisareru rachamim rabim mimayne Yeshua. And because of that it was an emergency, and there was ein lanu lehishoin ela avina shebashamayim, and in desperation, they were mafsik, the kadrusa, the safra, the Isha Mesaperes in Bala. They were Megilas Zokta Yeshua ben Levi, Elokim Ekrol Yomam V'Loisana, V'Laila, not Uv'Laila, V'Laila V'Lodumili. I had no choice but to be mafsik you in a zman that's not Yom and that's not Laila, right? Because this is the time I had no choice but to interrupt and to disturb you, right? Even though it's Shaloi Kados, and you answered me. But it's not the Uva it's Yom and Laila. It's Azman was a Nish Yom, and it's not Laila. It's not Yom and it's not Yala. It's a Gadus and the Isham, and you have to be we have to be very, very wary and very, 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 very careful not to interrupt that, because the implication and the result can be not good. But at that time, because there was no alternative, they were Dofkal Sham and Memela V'atok Kodesh Yoshev Tilus Yisrael, the Klal Yisrael was saved. Okay, and he, it was a time below Dumoyali. I really should have been doimim, should have been quiet, but because of the emergency, the extenuating circumstances, we interrupted, and you saved us, right? Memela, okay, we're right here already, Terry. Okay, Memela, what happened? Zokter Yeshua ben Levi to the Talmidim. Now do you understand why I said that the Zman of Megilas Shalayla is also like Krishma until the Netzach Hama? Do you understand now? Why? Because it's a Zman, it's not Yom and it's not Laila, it's a Zman of Kadrusa, the Safra, the Isha Mesaperes in Bala, and it's the time of desperation where you turn to the Kavayocha because there's no way out, there's no other alternative, and you interrupt him and you knock on his door and wake him up and tell him that the Germans invaded Norway. Right? Okay. Memela Rabosai, and we're finished. I have to daven my because I have to say Kaddish for someone at the outside. Memela Rabosai, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, that's why just as I agree that the Zman Kriya Shema Shel Arvis is until the Netzach Hama, because it's Ikla Inish Degona by Shata. The Zman Kriya, the Zman Megilas Shel Arvis, Shel Laila, is until the Netzach Hama. Right? Why? Because of the emergency, extenuating circumstances in the Kadusa, that it's a Loidumeya, that really I should have been Doimem, but I couldn't be because I had no alternative, and the Kilis Israel. What is Megilas Shel Laila and what is Megilas Shel Yom? Okay, and we're finished. The Megilas Shel Laila is Tzadik Nechlas Mitzora V'Yover Rosh B'Mkoimah. That the Torah says, you finish, no more of this. Right? What is the Megilas Shel Yom? The Megilas Shel Yom is the Gegalti. The Etzem Hayoim Hazeh Yotzo Kol Tzivas Hashem Mimitzrayim. Right? The Megillah Shel Laila is the Hatzola, right? That Achashverosh is mevatel the Gezela, right? The Megillah Shel Yom is v'nahafachu. That what? That Baboiker Yoichal Teref Ule'erev Yechalek Sholol Zok Rashi, that in the Boiker Shel Yisrael there was Shaul HaMelech who fought with Amalek, and the Erev is Yechalek Sholol, there was Vatosem Esther as Mordechai al Beis Haman. Zokt Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi that in that Megillah Shalayla is the Hatzola of the Hitzalti, right? The Bikkel of the Avdas, the Bikkel of the Shibud, right? Which was Elaka Ekra Yom Velasana, but Velayla Velodomoyali, that was the Hatzola, right? And Memela that Megillah Shalayla, since it's Keneged, the Vahotseisi, it's Keneged, the Yeshua, the salvation, the being saved from Moves L'chaim, that has to be in that Zman of Kadrusa de Shtafra when the nest took place at that time. It has to be till the Netzach Hama. The Megillah Shel Yom is Baboke Yoichal Teref, right? Uve'erev Yechalek Sholol. That is the Nahapechu, that Vatosem Esther Motchal Beis Haman, that not only Tzadik Nechlas B'tzara, but what happened was that Mordechai and Esther became the king and the queen, and they had a son, Yovesh, who rebuilt the second Beis Hamikdash. So Memela Zokt Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, it's necessary now, the Megillah Shalayla, which is Keneged the Hatzola. When did the Hatzola occur? Shaloi Kedas. The Kadrusa de Safra, when it's you shouldn't disturb. You're not allowed to disturb, but you had to disturb because there was no other alternative, right? Memela, the Megillah Shalayla, the mitzvah Megillah Shalayla has to demonstrate that, has to reflect that, and therefore it has to be till the Netzach Hama, because that was the Zman of the Pu'ula and the Yeshua of the Megillah Shalayla. Rabbi Chananya ben Akasha, Omer Rotza HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lezakas Et Yisrael, Leficha Chebel Am Torah Mitzvahs, David. Adar Chofetz Leman Tzidka, Yagdir, Torah V'Yagdir. Yeah. It was a Vafaher, no? My great-grandson. Number one. Gadal Mitzkadash Yisbar b'tzirmam yisnasei Yisadav Yisalev Yisalav Shmei D'Kudesha B'richu V'lo min kol b'chasa Shirasa Shishachasa V'nechamasa D'amiram B'yom Romein Al Yisrael Al Rabbanon V'al Talmidei V'al Kol Talmidei Hain Al Kol Mosen Doskim B'Rayis D'Brasei N'Chasar V'Sar V'lo N'Chan Shlom Rabba Chinu V'chitz V'rachmin Chayin Arichim Zon Arichai Kana Mikadamam L'Shmai V'Arovim Romein V'Ram L'Shmai L'Chayim Aleinu Al Kol Yisrael Romein Shalom B'Mroim Avu Baracham V'Yaseh Shalom Aleinu Al Kol Yisrael B'Mroim. We need a minion to Damar. Did you daven yet? No, okay. Okay, so figure it out. Who's in the Amati daven? Okay, did you daven yet? You can leave it. You'll do that afterwards. Okay. What? Okay, Chaim, you want to daven? Okay,
Okay,